Welcome back to Property Matters on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. So coming up today, we have a continuation of our Breaking Ground series, Meet the Leaders. And I chat to Jim Gallagher of Altu Architects. Jim, you're very welcome and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Carol. Thank you very much for the invitation.
I'm delighted. And actually, your brand has been coming up a lot in media and social media over the last number of months because there's been a fantastic rebrand, which we're going to get to. But let's start out. I've mentioned there Altu Architects. You are, in fact, an architect and you with more than 30 years experience in the industry. So you might just give our audience an introduction to maybe who you are and how you got into architecture.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I suppose architecture doesn't run in the family. It was I grew up and was educated in Glasgow, and at school I loved arts, maths, and techie drawing, the technical drawing side. And I attended a careers fair. I think I was about 14, and just saw this grizzled architect who was probably frazzled at the time, talking about house extensions. And but he came across with such passion. I just said, that's what I would like to do. Completely naive. I knew nothing about it. I didn't know any architects. In fact, when I applied to go to Strathclyde University, architecture was my number one and naval architecture was my number two. So not a clue. And got in there, made friends for life, got through the course, some high points, some low points. And then when I qualified, I myself and a buddy of mine went to London. And I suppose that's where the Irish connection starts, because we crashed on some very dubious floors until we found our own apartment of pals we'd met in the States when we worked over there for the summer. And I worked in London for 7 years for a very large practice, then a very small practice. My boss went out his own. So I went from a practice of 300 staff beside Hyde Park, and with my boss, Fraser Picotti, went out on his own. It was a two-man practice and a dog, and one of us had to take the dog out for a walk at lunchtime.
That's a big change to go from 300 to 2.
Yeah, but it was great. It gave you a bit of a round of all sorts. That you were, you were in the city centre practice, green as grass, and then you were into things that clients would only meet you at 8:00 at night because they were discussing a house extension, and there was a bit of commercial work there. So overall, I was 7 years in London and moved to Ireland. My wife's from Dublin. So once we got married, I moved here actually 25 years ago this week. We started in Cantrell Crowley, a practice in the south side, and I was there for 6 years, and then moved to Lafferty, the Lafferty Group, which was Lafferty Project Managers and Lafferty Architects in 2003, and they've not managed to get rid of me yet.
Yeah, well, again, these are some iconic names that you're talking about there. But I want to just touch on something purely because earlier this month we've had Women in Engineering, Women in Construction, and International Women's Day. And one of the points that came up was really how people choose the careers they choose. And you talk about enjoying subjects like technical drawing. Can you remember? Would there have been any diversity in the class for your technical drawing?
No, I went to co-ed school, a comprehensive in Glasgow, and absolutely not in technical drawing. I think, unfortunately, I was back in the day where all the girls went and did domestic, whatever,
Yeah.
We did domestic education, and we went and did technical drawing, and the lads that couldn't do technical drawing, they put in the woodwork and gave them lump hammers. So it was. So it was a very different day. But when we started in my course, I think it was about 30 of us, and I would say a third were female. That probably now there's a huge attrition rate in architecture. And 30 was a nice number, and we managed to get still in touch with a good few of the guys.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting about that is that obviously the month we've had where we reflect on how people choose their careers and how do we achieve diversity. And just when you talk about at 14 years of age going to a careers fair and actually being exposed to architects and things like that, that's something that's so influential. But actually just this weekend, I've recently discovered the joy of woodworking, having not been able to do anything. And so I'm driving the guys down our local lumberyard absolutely crazy because I know nothing. And I'm amazed at how much knowledge they have about really small things. And so I've actually started asking them, where did you learn that? And they say, well, first year in woodwork or something in secondary school. And so I'm realizing all these little skills like, using sand, sawdust to actually fill cracks, to get the colouring right and things like that. And it's like, how do you learn things like that? And these are things that are so basic. 13 and 14 and 15-year-old boys know them, and yet women don't. And then we're surprised. So actually, talk to me then about the attrition rate for architecture. Do you see, coming from your generation, was that equal for men and for women? Like, would the attrition rate be equal across both genders?
Yes, it would have been. It was. I think it's a course that's a very particular course. You have to have a passion for it. And it's a long course. So unless you're, probably in the first year, that's where most people will fall out. They aren't going to last the course. And then, of course, there's so many pitfalls over the 7 years that some people will take an extra year or take a couple of years out before doing the second degree. And then you've got your professional practice examination at the end. And some people leave that for 10 years before they do it. I mean, I was lucky enough that I just got the head down and, trust me, there were stumbles along the way, but just did it as fast as I possibly could to get it behind me. But, look, I had fantastic mentors at the time, particularly when I started in practice, because I knew nothing. Still learning all the time, but you learn from some brilliant people, and that's a great thing. There's a great curiosity, I think, in design and architecture, and people are curious and want to tell you things. And equally, as you were saying there about craftsmen, I think it's important, in whatever walk of life you do, that there are people that have huge experience, and it's learning those tricks and those tips and lessons.
Jim, 30 years, I mean, and that's since you've been in the industry, but you're talking about a passion that started when you were a teenager. Have you ever considered a career move out of architecture?
I think it'd be fairly useless anywhere else, Carol, to be perfectly honest. They haven't found me out here yet, so I think I'll keep going.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a minute, Jim. But no, I think it's amazing to be able to not just keep the passion for your not just career, but kind of what you've chosen to do, your mission in life, but it's actually to evolve alongside it. Because obviously we see that architecture has evolved in terms of not just the tools and the technologies, but actually in terms of the projects and the scale of the projects. So maybe talk me through some of your early projects. I mean, you're talking about a 7-year route to qualification, and you're saying you came out and you knew nothing.
And still probably learn no less and less as I go on. But you do, as you just have brilliant people with you. And I think actually there's a huge thing about graduates and the youth coming through, because there's a huge passion and the drive there, and great learnings. You can learn as well. I mean, my first project was possibly still definitely one of my favourites, and it was 100,000 square foot R&D facility. For a diagnostic company in North Wales. It was right on the foot of Snowdon. It was in an old slate quarry, and it just was magnificent. I used to go down once a month for a 2-day site visit. I travelled 5.5 hours from London, and I absolutely adored it. And I did my Part 3 project on it. And I remember the external examiners asked me, because I was so positive on D&B, design and build. And they had enough experience to be cynical about the whole thing. And I was talking about collaboration and how when the contractor and the design team and everyone's working, and the client are all working together, how that collaborative approach can be far more rewarding, present better end results and such. And these lads are saying, well, you are joking about this, aren't you? They'd been through it. But to be fair, there might have been a huge dose of naivety there. But it was something that has stuck with me. I think if we can collaborate as an industry, we will definitely get better results through there. Everyone has to do their job and bring their own skill set to it. But equally as good clients make good buildings, so do good contractors and good design teams.
There's so much of what you've said there I want to unpack and deal with separately, but I'm going to jump the order here. Integrated project delivery is something that is now being touted as a route to success. But how is that different to the collaboration that you're talking about kind of 25 years ago?
Oh, well, when I started off, there was no CAD. It was in its infancy, effectively. I remember actually the first practice I worked for, they had a CAD machine that cost 35,000 sterling. And one guy was sent away for a fortnight to get trained on it. It looked like something out of the Starship Enterprise. Nobody else could use it. And of course, he was poached by a window manufacturer within about 6 months. So they lost all that knowledge, and this thing gathered dust in the corner. But and then when I moved to London, it was the CAD system was like a typing pool. Nobody had PCs. This is 1990. So you went up and you brought your it was double handing. You brought your drawings up to the CAD guys, and they actually ran in 3 shifts because the machines were so expensive. And the guys came at 6 a.m. through to 2, and it was good bunch of guys. And it was only really, I suppose, the mid-noughties that PCs came in, and we all started getting into CAD. And we, at what was Lafferty Architects and now is Altu Architects, we get into BIM. Actually, it was one of our Polish colleagues was working in ArchiCAD, and he brought probably an illegal program back in 2006 over and started working there. And some of our own guys were very curious about it and started building. So when the recession hit sorry, I'm jumping about, but we'll get back to that collaboration point. We invested very heavily in 2012 as a point of difference. When I say we invested very heavily, it was the last scrapings of the piggy bank back then. And we brought BIM across the board, across the practice. Now, we had gone from, I think, just over 80 staff down to 16 staff at the time. So it was a much easier task to train everyone up. And we brought in external trainers, and we exclusively work in BIM. And that really is a fantastic collaboration tool. Through the design process, the planning process, the detailed design process, and the construction delivery process. We have clients that can use the BIMX program on there to go on their iPad. They can show their stakeholders, funders, how things are developing, how it looks. But really, it's just a great data collaboration piece. And with that, you find a much more collaborative piece. One of we were doing a design and build job about 3 or 4 years ago, and the contractor, he embraced BIM as well. And the actual design team meetings with the contractor and subcontractors on board, where we're virtually working through the model and solving the problems before they hit site, fantastic. And that's been around for a long time, but the industry just needs to embrace it more. It needs to be supported more by government to do this, and then coupled with more innovative ways of construction delivery, such as offsite construction and such.
Do you see that that's happening now? Because I suppose I'm looking at kind of the initiatives where we are now in 2022. But when you introduced this across the board back in 2012, you talk about it being a point of difference, but I would imagine it's not just a point of difference in terms of your service offering. Did this in some way shape the type of clients that wanted to work with you, and possibly not all positive? Yes. Were some clients not in favour of this?
No, absolutely. Because initially what we do not do is we do market rates. We don't charge. This is what we do for BIM. This is what we don't do. We just do BIM as default. And yes, there would be, maybe some of there was one instance where a client, and I had to speak to him so many times. It was a very large project, and his suspicion was BIM was slowing things down. And it was because other design team members weren't embracing it the same way, or were going through the back channels and saying, "Oh, this is crazy. You don't really know what this BIM is doing." But once his eyes were open to what it was delivering and what we were doing, he could see the benefits of this. But there's no doubt. Back in 2012, there was the phrase was "lonely BIM," and we were lonely BIMers. Back then. Now, it's a tool at the end of the day. It's no different to when I started off, you had tracing paper and a razor blade to correct errors on drawings, and die line machines with that lovely distinctive smell. So Look, I think they're all tools. I think we've fantastic people in this industry. And I don't think, you need to be a zealot or a passionate person about the tool you use. It's just a method of delivering a better communicative and collaborative process and approach to work.
Are you surprised that the Irish government were so far behind the UK government, say, in mandating BIM for public projects?
No, I'm not surprised. I was at a talk where it was some minister of public procurement I think it was around about 2014 or something, and the UK government were bringing in mandatory tier 2, BIM level tier 2, I think, or level 2, sorry, in 2016. And the question was put to him. I don't remember who he was, and wouldn't name him anyway, but he said that they wouldn't be bringing BIM into government contracts because it was it wasn't creating a level playing field, because some companies don't have it, so that would be a problem. So really what we were doing was saying, let's not innovate, let's go to the lowest common denominator, and we'll take it there. So no, I'm not surprised. I think there's certain things that are very good and enabling about tools such as BIM, and then there's other things that if you're doing it just as a process in a system, then don't do it. Nowhere it's good. I mean, we haven't yet been able to take it into the FM stage of buildings, which of course it's made for, but very few clients will update that model, embrace it, keep it going. But I think more and more as the environment has to come into play, sustainability, how buildings operate, then I think that will just absolutely be mandatory through there. But look, I mean, very much have been a case. I sit in the Council of Property Industry Ireland, and many times we've written, and I did chair the Construction Innovation Policy Group, and we wrote papers and wrote to government, and there's some great bodies out there like CETA as well that are doing a lot of good work in this area. It'll get there. But it'll get there as it becomes the norm. But as far as I'm aware, there's not, we've never received a grant for the hundreds of thousands we've spent on this, purely because we think it makes us do our job more efficiently.
Yeah, obviously we're seeing the Construction Innovation Group and a couple of subcommittees under that. We've got Build Digital, you've mentioned CETA. Is there an overly academic leaning to trying to get the industry to embrace technology? Because it seems to me a lot is being done, but it's being done by academics, and I'm not seeing it filtering down in the industry. Now, obviously, you're at the coalface there, so maybe you have a different perspective. I think
it's difficult because we're all trying to hit a moving target. I mean, we're in a very cyclical industry, and nobody really rests on their laurels. Margins aren't high in the industry either in terms of reinvestment. If you're a very large company, it's very difficult because what do you do? Do you stand down 200 architects and do no projects while you try and train them up, or do you do it in sections? If you're a very small business, how do you invest? I suppose we were fortunate that as we grew and evolved, I mean, we started off when, of the 16 in the practice, there was only 8 architects at that time, back in 2012, I think. And we had, just because we were hit with the recession with everyone else, we kept going, but we had to keep letting the air out the balloon, unfortunately. And as we grew up again to our current 35 staff, what we do is we bring people in. We're not looking for people that can use BIM. We're looking for really talented architects and technologists, and bring them in, and we'll train them up, and we'll just enable really good people to work to their peak, hopefully.
Actually, this might be a good point for us to really talk about the rebranding, restructuring, rebranding exercise there that Altu Architects has just gone through, because I'm conscious that we're kind of jumping from brand to brand, and just, I suppose, really to show the line of continuity there. So Altu, the new brand, was launched earlier this year. Was it February?
That's correct. That was in February, Carol. Yeah,
you might just talk us through kind of the how and why that happened.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we as I say, we were formed 25 years ago, actually, as the Lafferty Design Group, and that principally was architects and project managers. And since about 2014, as we were growing again, we set up 2 distinct management teams, because they're different disciplines, under one board, and really strong governance from our chairman. Bernie Cullinan, So we had a really good governance to set with. Then we had independent management teams. And it was back in 2018 as we were doing our next 3-year business plan. We realised that we actually had 2 very different visions for the business because we were different disciplines. And we got to the stage that we realised that to enable both disciplines to grow and both businesses to grow, we had to separate. Very amicable, conscious uncoupling, I think was the phrase in the side. But and they've retained the Lafferty brand, and we were Lafferty Architects while we were going through the rebranding process. And we went on a journey, had some really good support from brand companies such as The Pudding, great media backup, and think from Bold Media, with good website designers as well. And that name will come to me or I'll be killed. But anyway, the really strong thing, but it took us a year. It took us a year to come with the right brand, the right name, one that's very reflective of us as an architectural design practice. Because although there was a lot of good legacy with the Lafferty name, it was the right time to change. And we've done it with the blessing of Pat Lafferty, who it was called after. And I think it was very important for us as well to find a brand that's not only reflective as our identity, but everybody within the practice can work into. So we've been very fortunate. We've got strong feedback. There is Latin meaning behind the Altu name, but I won't go there because a lot of the guys are saying, I'm not going to use that. It's very embarrassing. But ultimately, Altu Architects just has a very nice ring to it.
Well, tell us, talk us through that.
Yeah, well, the Altu, we kicked about a lot of names and we tried to resist ourselves going down that route, but we eventually rounded back to as a bunch of creatives doing it. I think it was one of my colleagues, Dara, that came up with the Altu name, and we kind of reverse engineered the meaning to it because the altus is Latin to foster, to nurture, and to develop, which is the things we do, and is very reflective of us. So we took it to Altu as a piece there with fantastic graphic designers that The Pudding had put us in touch with that took the brand piece. We had brilliant work done by our colleagues in-house. And I think that's the important thing with the branding. You can't just pay someone, go away and do that and be very surprised that it doesn't reflect anything that you stand for. So we had, although we had kind of client ownership over it, 2 of our colleagues, Jack Byrne and Claire Healy, who are associate directors in the practice and very creative people in their own right, spent thousands of hours on this, working with the brand companies and taking it through. And then we had workshops with the wider group. And I suppose what really surprised us was we had actually quite uncanny and quite spooky alignment across the board. We broke up into groups. It was all done in teams, obviously, with COVID. But we broke up into groups, and not only did we come back with the exact same vision for the company, but we came back with it in the same order, the different groups. And
let's kind of get as specific as we can about that then. What is the vision for Altu?
Well, I think ultimately it boils down to, rather than using the names that any company can grab in or the buzzwords, I think ultimately we just want to create, we want to create a great legacy of built work for people that will get a positive experience from enjoying it and will contribute to the environment as well. That's simply what it boils down to. It's what we do, and fine, we build that on great sound business fundamentals so that everyone away can not worry about paying for shoes next month, and we can then actually concentrate on the creative aspect of our work and making sure our projects can be the best they possibly can be.
One thing that whenever I speak to leaders across really any facets of the built environment, there is almost always this driving passion to create something better, to build better, to create something that is legacy worthy. And so for me, I find it genuinely difficult when the reputation of the entire industry is being I suppose, being bandied about in such a negative way and in such a flippant way as well, not understanding maybe the consequences that has on people choosing this as a career, people trusting the industry, people actually rowing behind and taking the time to understand the vision for projects that are trying to be created. And I think that's something that has been a problem for a while. I think it was absolutely compounded by the crash and a lot of the media reporting around that. And by the way, obviously some of that was justified and arguably some of it wasn't. But it felt like we were getting onto an even keel where projects were being almost evaluated on their quality up until a few years ago when, where we really started to see affordability issues kick in. We started to see project overruns become very public. We started to see new developments being blocked by members of the community and members, people who weren't members of the community through judicial review. And we know that they've increased. I mean, over a certain period of time, it was increasing 1,000%. So these are all problems that can be linked to the industry having a reputational problem and going through a bit of an identity crisis externally. And I think it's really interesting when we see companies rebrand, because actually what they're trying to do is almost an individual of what the industry as a collective has to do. So you mentioned there that your work with Property Industry Ireland and some of the other bodies that are trying to collectively raise the reputation of the industry. Where do you see that at the moment? Because you've 30 years experience. How the public perception of this industry, where do you think it is right now?
Well, I don't think it's great. I think it's definitely better than it was just immediately post-crash, because I think the whole narrative was about everyone was out there. We were all on the bus driving over the cliff at the time. It is an industry that gets hammered. I think it gets hammered in the media. I think also the fact you see with the JR that you mentioned, that's not put out there in a way. That media narrative isn't out there just now. This is homes for people. There's a huge amount of different elements that go into cost. Everything's going the wrong way in terms of cost just now. And you get a few highlighted projects, which admittedly should never have happened, the Priory Halls of this world and various things where you have people that were not doing the job properly. I think what we have to do is build on the fact that BCAR is a positive thing, because the self-regulation, I came over here in 1997, and I went, self-regulation, what's that self-regulation about? Really? And you didn't go through all the aspects of building control with the building control officer. You did a fire cert. And I found that quite alien, that you were signing off on your own work. And the BCAR, I know, was a difficulty for everyone, and it's still elements of it that are very unwieldy, but it's better than nothing. I mean, in reality, the Scottish system, and we did a bit of work up in Scotland a few years ago, and it's the local authority that take the building control onus, and they sign off effectively. So they're inspecting. And it's difficult to get things through, and you've got to actually have all your ducks in a row before you start on site, and it takes longer, and there's cost to it. But once you do that, there is surety there. There is a greater degree and perception of this is built right. Now, I think we've got really talented people and really committed and people of integrity within our industry, and we've got some of the best, if you even look at some of the architects we have world leaders in architects, whether it be Grafton or O'Donnell and Toomey, and hopefully eventually Altu, but we're a few years off that. But just in terms of, I think it's something we have to keep chipping away at through the bodies. We have to get that trust back. The JR, I think, as I say, it's absolutely. It's unconscionable what's happening just now about how homes are there. And there is a real body of people that don't want to see homes being delivered for political capital. And you even look at the cost of construction. There's only so many things can be done by contractors or developers in the cost of construction, because we are at the end of a food chain. And there is a cost of labour, there's various things, but when over 50% are in non-construction costs, such as tax, land costs, other elements there. And then you get the JR processes that you mentioned, Carol, and a few ambulance chasers out there. rallying up this thing. The judiciary should have no part in this.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
I would think, though, on the judicial review, I genuinely believe the system is broken. So I don't think actually at this point we can blame the community.
No.
You're absolutely right. I think there are political agendas that don't want to see these problems solved. However, one thing I would say is that when we meet with community groups, they genuinely don't believe they have any other choice. And the reality is, I think what really surprises the community to learn is that actually this process that gives rise to the community feeling their only course or recourse is judicial review, to learn that doesn't serve the developers either, or that it doesn't serve the industry. And I marvel at a process that doesn't serve anyone that it's supposed to serve. How it continues, how is it sustained? And look, obviously, I know that changes are coming, and that it's not the plan is not for it not to be sustained. But the reality is, I think that we have an overly political influence on our housing in a way that political cycles are relatively short compared to making cycles, and I think that's such a problem, and it's such it's vesting the wrong political interest in the wrong place.
No, correct. I think there should be the professional planning body should be left to do this, because you then are looking at decades in planning, as happens in other countries, as opposed to what gets the votes on the doors tomorrow. Because in reality, what we're doing is we're cheating the generation coming through. When I moved to Ireland, actually 1st of April 1997, and I bought a house on the 2nd of April 1997. I think it was just stupid luck, whatever, the first house up in the Gallops. But that's not open to that generation. Not, in the likes of fine if maybe you're a great software engineer or something, it can be, but not for the majority of, professions and jobs out there.
Yeah.
And I just think it's wrong.
There are so many broken parts of the system. We know that elements are being looked at. Obviously, we want them to be looked at together. I have consistently maintained that I don't believe there's enough private sector influence actually in going into the policy making and the procedural side of it. However, I seem to be unique in my hopefulness about Ireland's new housing commission. I'm genuinely optimistic about it. I seem to be the only person who is, but I genuinely am, because I think, it's been led by John O'Connor, who has been a very strong civil servant and a very balanced and fair civil servant. And we've got Michael O'Flynn on the commission, who I think is a strong.
I'm a great fan of Michael's. Yeah.
Who isn't? I think he's done some objectively excellent work. So therefore, he's really contributed to this industry. But other than that, it's all academic and public sector. So is one private sector voice enough to steer what is essentially supposed to steer an entire built environment?
Yeah, it's difficult. And as I say, it's come back to hitting that as a business, you're trying to hit the next moving target again, as opposed to, large investment. Even if you look at the margins of contractors and stuff, they're all very tight and it needs to work. But then that leads us into an adversarial, contractual side where nobody can come together and work. But look, I think it's like the housing crisis. It's multifaceted. We're not going to sort it out on a Monday morning, but
it is. And you know what? When you talk about that, straight away my mind is going to the public procurement and the fixed price contracts. But I'm not going to take you down that direction today, because again,
there's better people than me that can opinion on that. Yeah.
Well, do you know what? Actually, I think the crux of the matter is we need all experienced voices feeding into this. But let's take it back to the projects that Altu is facing at the moment. You mentioned the team there, 35 people on the team. What projects do you have on the horizon that you can talk about that you're excited about?
Yeah, well, we've got a very nice balance of projects, and what gives me a buzz is working with people and working with really positive, talented people. And I'm lucky that they're all more talented than I am anyway. And you see this is the best team I've worked with in over 30 years just now. And I think the Altu brand has given us all a new energy as well. We've moved into offices in Camden Street. So, we need to make sure we don't have the sore heads in the morning as well, because it's a great buzz around the place. into there. But I think the projects that we're working on just now, we've very carefully targeted a balance. We obviously residential is persuasive at the moment. It's everywhere. And we're doing a lot of high density schemes for fantastic clients across there. And some of them are large master planning schemes going into planning schemes just now. And really good, very well knowledgeable clients that are building really strong skilled teams that are working with you through this. So that's great, and we're, I think we've got something 8,000 homes on our books at the moment through various stages, some just delivered, some on site, and the majority in planning or detailed design. But what's nice is a lot of that is mixed use. We're doing it not just, here's an apartment development on its own. We're elements of the urban centres around there as well, and kind of urban villages in some of the things we're taking. We traditionally would have done a lot of commercial work, both in office and retail. So we're still, working in Dundrum Town Centre. We delivered the Pembroke, some of the projects in the Pembroke district there just now. The Donnybrook Fair have moved into the new square there. That was a nice project. There's a bit of placemaking and creating an external aspect to the centre, which Lafferty were involved with, the project management arm 20 odd years ago. So we're working on, I think, even the BTs, although we didn't do the fit out, we did the shell of that. So, and then we're doing some great work out in Blanchardstown, the Square, Pavilions. So we still do a fair bit of, and Blackrock Shopping Centre, we've done a nice, beautiful job there, actually, very architectural with the office building. Doing a lot in offices as well. One of the nice projects that my colleague Oliver and his team delivered was the Enterprise House, which is now Zurich House in Blackrock. So that was a rebuild of a 1984 office building, demolished it and brought it to 85,000 square feet of grade A office. And it's often a super project, great looking, crisp building.
There's a lovely range of projects there across sectors. So it's in terms of the office, I'm interested, there's so much speculation and commentary about what the future of work will likely look like. And, again, it's still very early to be having that conversation, but what kind of trends are you picking up on from, because you describe your clients as knowledgeable, so what kind of trends are they foreseeing in the office?
Well, I think the experience of the office is critically important. I mean, after 2 years working from home, almost with intermittent bits in between, the getting back to the culture of having an office, to having even the socialisation. We know all a bit about the collaboration and everyone in together. I mean, we only moved into Camden Street last week because the fit out was only cobbler's children. We were a month late waiting for lighting and all sorts going on. But the buzz coming back, but what we're doing is we're taking, and I think we would be probably representative of a lot of the industry. We actually found a lot of positives working remotely. We actually went off for a test day on the 13th of March 2020, and we flagged a week before, well, we're going to go and work at home as a test day. And of course, events of that week happened very quickly, and we never went back to the office for another almost 18 months. And but we found out we didn't skip a beat, and it's into a lot of investment in technology, a lot of because we're working in BIM, we're working in an integrated federated model, which we have a Polish office. So the team in Poland are working on the same projects we're working on in the same model in the real time. So, and effectively, you could say we were working remotely for there. Equally, we found staff that we had, brilliant staff we had that had gone home for pregnancy, gone home to rear children. And we've got one great colleague in Bulgaria, and she went back and she's now joined us again part-time, working from Bulgaria, and she's plugging into teams. Now, she's only working for front-end projects, but we've been able to take talented staff back again, which has been great. So I think the hybrid thing is certainly something we want to embrace. So I think a lot of companies will probably go for higher quality space, better locations. I mean, we've moved into the city centre and paying higher rent for less space than we would have done if we want to grow to the 50 staff we want. But we're going to do that through trying to create a shared experience from working remotely, so people aren't commuting every day and coming in, and keeping it reasonably flexible and listening to staff. And I think as well, as I say, is that just the buzz and the experience of being back in the office. I know I'll be back in the office a lot more than 50% because I just enjoy it, because you're walking down the street, you'll meet someone. You'll have a chance meeting with clients. You're more likely to meet for coffee, meet for a sandwich, have in-house meetings. So I think there have been positives. The Teams meetings, although they're a bane, it saved a lot of time instead of going for, spending the day going to Kerry for a 1 hour meeting. You can do that in Teams. Now, you can't take off the site experience. You have to go and visit that. But we would have been goosed, absolutely goosed in the recession if, COVID had hit at the same time.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have that technology.
Yeah.
And I think it has been, if it's used as an enabler and it's blended with a really strong focus on, we have a community of a team. And I think that's where Office will come into it. I mean, we've done a couple of large fit outs recently for clients. And it is all about the collaborative space, the making sure their canteen and catering facility. Now, there's downsides of that as well. I mean, Kira, my wife, works in the public sector, and they have a flexible, I won't mention where, they have a flexible approach to attending in. And they're saying the canteen can't run a service because they're just not getting enough people in.
Yeah.
And I think there will be a bit of reluctance. I have heard, I have heard that a lot of people are finding it to go back. But I think if you're very rigid in saying you're in office 100% or you're working from home 100%, I think that's going to be problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, I'm personally really excited about. We've always been running a remote team. We're a small team, so kind of we went from 6 and we'll be going to 8, but we've always been remote, and it's just kind of how it was. The only difference is we've an office in Dublin, but we also opened one in rural County Galway, and my problem is that I fall in love with rural County Galway, so I'm finding it very difficult to get back to Dublin. There's a lot of cancelled meetings and in-person meetings being moved to Zoom. But you're right, the experience is different. Now, my experience is probably the opposite to yours, walking down Camden Street. I have stone walls and donkeys and a sea view, so it's not quite Camden Street.
Yeah.
There is a buzz, but
there's a few donkeys in Camden Street.
I know that to be true. But just I think what's really interesting, you're describing around the commercial the commercial projects, language that 10 and 15 years ago would have been almost exclusively used for residential, where we talk about experience and placemaking and community. So that makes me wonder if all of that is now being encompassed in the workplace, what kind of residential trends are you seeing on the placemaking? Are you seeing any impacts from COVID that are being adopted and adopted as trends that are likely to continue?
Yeah, I think the actual the passion for your area, the loyalty to local, was a very positive piece. I mean, God, we all knew we were 2 kilometres within an inch, and then 5 kilometres we felt we lost the run of ourselves. But I think there will be a lot of that. If you get very good quality shops or cafes or various things, they will be supported. I think it's really imperative that we do get people back into the city. Otherwise, the cities will be hollowed out. The same way they were hollowed out with residential 20 years ago by everyone moving out. You'll actually find the businesses can't thrive because there's nobody in offices. You'll find that the FSC and various places. You'll find boarded up restaurants and shops and such, and that would be a shame also. So there has to be a balance. I think if there's a balance on people's time, or if somebody clocks off at 6 o'clock or whatever, God, they can walk out to the garden. They can do that. They don't have that hour and a half to get home and not put the kids to bed, or maybe they don't want to put the kids to bed, and maybe an hour and a half's handy. But I think there is a quality of life to be able to do that. That you're not always on public transport or you're in the car stuck in traffic. But it has to be balanced, because I think we'd be a very dull society if we're all just talking to each other on screens.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And actually, I think one thing that's really exciting about kind of the wave of new, not just technologies, but innovation, how we live and work feels like it's really open to change at the moment. So we have an opportunity to not just fall into a habit or a routine or a process. We really have an opportunity to shape it in a way that maybe we haven't seen in previous decades.
It's similar. I mean, if you actually think of the rapid changes in, say, retailing that online has brought, the rapid changes on how we live, how we work, and I think it's all up there. And I think we can take the positives from that. I mean, if you'd come to me just over 2 years ago and someone had said they'd like to work 50% from home, I'd have kind of looked at them and said, well, I'm quite happy to pay you 50% of your salary. I was a dinosaur, but you learn and you see the benefits, and I think if we take the positives from it, I think we can build better places for us to work, so that when you're coming in, it's an enjoyable experience as well as being very productive. It's got to work for the company too.
Yeah.
But I mean, we are in a place that we can't ignore, what our team want, because I mean, the team ultimately in my business, my only value and our only value as a business as Altu Architects is our team.
A company is just the collection of its people, the value that's created, but it's also kind of the magic or the spark, it's the bringing together of those people. I genuinely am so excited to see how these impacts are going to play out. Just this morning, before we started recording here, the DAF.ie, myhome.ie and REA, the Real Estate Alliance reports, all landed this morning on my desk. And the headline figures are such that housing has increased €100 a day since the start of the year. We're seeing these consistent increases. We're seeing estate agents are telling us that they have never seen such levels of undersupply. The REA spokesperson was talking about fewer than 20 properties on the market in Killarney at the moment. And what was really probably shouldn't have been surprising, because it actually means that all of the anecdotal commentary that we've heard over the last 18 months has actually borne out. But there was a Leitrim estate agent saying that 2/3 of all their sales are from people not from the area. So essentially, every time Leitrim is reported as the cheapest county in Ireland, people who are priced out of the city direct their household. And by the way, anybody who's not familiar with Leitrim and visits it for the first time will be blown away by the beauty of it, by the variety of the landscape. But what really surprised me, as a country that has very little coastal access, lakes everywhere. So you feel like you're by the coast as well. So it didn't surprise me that people who investigated will fall in love with it. But we're going to have this happen all over Ireland. Yeah,
it's bizarre. I mean, we've the least dense, probably the least dense population in Europe. Yet we've got the highest land costs that feed into a lot of the prices. If we don't get it right, and as you said, I agree with you, Carol, it's multifaceted. And we all have to do it, but we are failing the generation coming up. I mean, if we lose our talent because the only thing they feel is they have to go to Australia or the Middle East or somewhere, or Canada, then we lose our talent.
But Jim, is it the case that if value is seen more balanced across the country, that actually we might start to see affordability seep into our cities? So, for example, just in the last number of days, on Board Planola were very vocal that they will no longer be allowing low density housing in areas that in Dublin suburbs, very like within walking distance of the city centre, so the likes of Sandymount and
yes.
Other areas, that they will no longer allow low density development, that actually sites such prime sites have to be fully utilised. Is that something you welcome?
Yes, I do, in terms of that, because the sites in question, if they're service land, if they're within good commuting piece, we have to go for a density. Now, we've got to also accept the fact high density development is more expensive than, detached houses. And really, that's where land values do reflect that piece, that they have to come in. But I would welcome it there. I think there are inconsistencies with the consistency across the board. But in certain cases, like rural towns and such, if you're starting to, and Board Planola are insisting on the same density ratio there, nobody is going to buy an apartment in some of these areas. So, and it's not the product the market wants. So there has to be a very context-driven approach to this from the planning piece. But I agree. If we can, it's not Charlie's decentralisation, but if we can get a more balanced piece, and part of that might be through remote working, or working hubs and a different approach to working. Equally, off-site construction. if off-site construction was being built in Leitrim or somewhere there, as long as you get road access to this and you're actually creating jobs locally, you help balance out the skills shortage we have. I mean, the off-site construction is something that absolutely needs to be supported by government. I know the LDA have ambitions to do that because we're a very small market. We've done our own, in Property Industry Ireland, we did our own studies on this, and it's all to do with the quantum in the market, and it's very, very difficult. If you've got a set supply of, well, I know I'm doing 5,000 units this year, then you could maybe start getting the factory up there. We're quite a small piece. It needs to be kind of like, like Ireland Inc. that's coming around to do this. But if you got that type of spread, then perhaps we're doing, because we do have a lot of landmass. And we have a beautiful country, and it has to be developed sustainably. It can't just be ribbon development. It cannot be just, the bungalow bliss everywhere. So then if you've got that, you have the communities where you can build the skills, you build the infrastructure, you take it there. But I think a lot of it's down to the fact that it's so politically connected, planning and development, that it's what wins the next vote as opposed to long-term sustainable plans. I remember, I don't know if it was around about 2002 or 4 or something like that, that they had this, the development plan, the National Development Plan came out at the time, and hot in its heels, there was this decentralisation came out, and it was like, forget the National Development Plan. This one's where all the everyone's going to chase. Yeah. So look, we're too small a country to be to not have joined up thinking, really.
Well, I can tell you, I'm showing my age here, but I was living in North Kerry very early in my career when the decentralisation plan started to be rolled out, and that huge, giant revenue building in the centre of this tiny village, and it was just a ghost building for almost a decade. So, look, I think some of our language, we need to be really careful about the language we use as well. Yeah. Nobody ever wants to hear decentralisation again. But before we finish up, I'm conscious that we're running close to the end of our time. And frankly, Jim, I could talk to you all day. But offsite construction, you mentioned, you said earlier on, you've referred a couple of times to the need for us to embrace offsite and other modern methods of construction. You've also referred to your clients as knowledgeable. So tell us, where is the disconnect happening? Is it a supply issue in Ireland, or why is our take-up of offsite so low?
Well, it's a supply and it's a cost issue on the side. Now, there are different methods of offsite construction. It doesn't all have to be each of the units are craned in and each of the units come on, and it can be even timber framed, or it can be, component size piece. But it's an investment piece. There's so many components that go into the cost of a house. The SCSI have had some fantastic reports out there that put everything down and break it down into that. What's a non-construction cost element, whether it be tax or land or profits or fees or all of this type of thing that you take. So there's only so many things that can be chipped away at. And until off-site construction becomes more of the norm, it is a premium product. Now, I think you'll find off-site construction will take more in dense areas, where it's all about program, it's all about delivery to site. As other things, as the cost of construction goes up as well, I think there'll be some equaliser to the offsite piece. There's a massive investment to start it. I know a number of the large contractor bodies have really invested quite heavily in this area. And I know
they've invested heavily, but they've also invested heavily by effectively acquiring the supply chain, which locks up.
Which shuts it out to everyone else, exactly. But they've got to run their business. I know Homes England over in the UK, are doing some fantastic work, and they've actually got a positive kind of bias towards offsite construction now, and they're accepting the fact there's a premium on this, and they're partnering up with the likes of Urban Splash and other bodies to try and deliver very large projects. There's a very large project. They're developing a lot of the old World War II air bases around Cambridge and such, where there's 20,000 units can come into that. And they're using that element of scale. And I think they're even marked up with one of the Japanese companies where They've got a long legacy and history in doing it. So I suppose it's like many things. We'll probably look across the water and take the good and the bad and see what mistakes were made as well. But it will come. It will come. No different to me. You know, I don't use a razor blade on tracing paper anymore. 30 years later, it will happen.
That's fair. And look, final question. You know, over your 30-year career, I'm sure you've learned lots the hard way and the easy way. But your advice for anybody coming into the industry?
Well, I think have a passion for it. Be curious is really important. I think it's a really easy thing to do if you enjoy working with people. Now, there is huge frustrations around projects, as you can imagine, tensions and various things. So I think you have to enjoy interaction with people. Through there, learn from people, listen to people as well, and that works both ways. I mean, you might have a graduate coming out that you can learn loads from that they're taken through. I tend to trust people first rather than the other way around, and see. But I think if everybody works together in their industry, we've got some brilliant people here. We really have, in the Irish industry. I mean, I love the size of the Irish. It's small, it's a village, and it's really enjoyable. So it's important to be true to what you believe in as well, and as I say, be passionate. And don't take the easy option by throwing the blame around or any of that, because it'll come around again, and you'll be at the receiving end. So working with people.
Without losing the eloquence, I always remember very early in my career, my background was in law, learning that be careful of the toes you step on the way up. They might be connected to whatever you have to kiss on the way down. And I think in Ireland that is just particularly true.
And it's immediate. It's not like I used to say I worked in London at a very junior level for 7 years, and you might work for a client and then never see that client again, or never, London was that scale, but in Ireland you absolutely will. So your reputation and your trust is everything.
Yeah. I think that's a really strong note to finish on, and some great advice. That's it from Breaking Ground on iProperty Radio. My thanks to Jim Gallagher of Altu Architects this week. I look forward to a tour of the Camden Street offices. You can get in touch with the show on social media at iProperty Radio, or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. My thanks to the Hear Me Roar production team and to Luke Delaney on sound for Dublin South FM. Until next time, thank you for listening.